this episode of Super Seicento, we are finishing the rebuild. Yeah, you heard me. Hello you lot, Miller Corner here, welcome back to Super Seicento. You will note that the almost completely rebuilt Super Seicento is sitting next to me in its new shell. While I was driving over here today, I realised that the amount of jobs left to do before we can get my epic little car back on the road again can be counted on the fingers of just one hand. And that makes me a very, very happy and excited Joe indeed. So without further ado, let's push the car over there to the ramp and crack on. With the engine, suspension and a now intact gearbox fitted, we're moving on to my uprated Punto GT Turbo front brakes, and to mix it up a bit, you'll see bits of this process on both sides of the car. Never let it be said that this series doesn't push the boundaries. The caliper assemblies were unbolted for the engine swap, so the cable ties are cut, and after cracking the nuts with a spanner, the calipers are unscrewed from the brake hoses. A clamp on the line minimises brake fluid spillage, and now the bigger calipers can be screwed onto the lines and the nut tightened up with a spanner. Which is where exactly?
Can I just give it to you?
No, it's there. Trolley.
No, it's not the right one.
Different spanner.
How can I've lost the bloody spanner? Here it is.
We have to, every time we work on this car. We have to. Every time we work on this car, we lose a tool. You know this.
Not that, is it? It's not 14.
It is a 14, yeah. Oh, it is a 14. Told you.
Yeah, we're going to get that, so it's...
That's it. Got it?
Yeah, it should be cool.
With the nut tightened up, I then use a wire brush to clean up the steering and the hub assembly before the hubs are copper greased to make the discs easier to remove. The discs are then fitted, and some brake cleaner and a rag tidies up any surface dirt and rust that they might have built up during their 4 months in hibernation. The caliper carriers are then slotted over the discs and bolted onto the hubs before I spin the disc to check the clearance. Oh, look at that.
Oh, you're right.
Ow! What's that hurt? It went between the disc and the bloody track rod end. On the plus side, the disc works. It was a stupid accident, my own fault, and proof that you should always watch where you put your hands when working on a car. Thankfully though, on the other side... Okay, does the disc spin? I've learned my lesson, I'm going to hold it there. Yes, there we go, we're good. Alright. Fingers only slightly ruined, the pads are then copper greased at the sides before being slotted into the carriers. The calipers are then inserted into the carriers and securely bolted in place with a final tighten up courtesy of a spanner holding the caliper sliders. The retaining clip rings on the hub nuts are then bashed into the nut itself with a massive hammer to make sure that they definitely can't pop out. The brake hoses are rubber greased, and I used the same guns that held up a gearbox last week to push them tightly into the holder on the struts. Are they in?
Yes.
Yeah? Yes. We then check the steering lock to make sure there's enough length in the hoses before one final check to make sure that everything's done up.
Are you happy with them?
I'm happy with those. If it falls off, it's my fault. And that's on camera. Notice how this spins as well, and there's 2 reasons why it spins. Reason 1 is it hasn't got a finger trapped in it, and reason 2 is it's got a diff attached to it now. Next we can raise the car up with me inside it to bleed the brakes. We covered brake bleeding in depth in the Punto GT brakes install video, so check that out for a full guide. But having done this before, it's pretty easy, and before too long the car's lowered back down with bled brakes and good pedal feel. With the bigger brakes now fitted, we need to put on my 14-inch Abarth wheels to clear them. With the Abarth wheels on, it's starting to look more and more like my car again, and with the engine and suspension reinstalled, a fully functioning gearbox, and now all the brakes refitted and bled and the wheels on, it's time to drive the Super Seicento under its own power. Ready? We have gears. Go. Hey, there we go. Brakes are good. Oh wow, this steering wheel's so small.
Leave it there a minute, we'll put some stuff away.
It drives, it moves, it rolls. It drives under its own power. What a mad car. So it's the beginning of the end for the last part of the rebuild. It's a new day, it's been 2 days since we last filmed, and as you can probably hear, I've gained a cold and I am not sounding too great. Hence you can't really understand the rest of what I'm saying here. Before I arrived at the workshop, Dad replaced the crusty and knackered old radiator with a brand new one, complete with new hoses before bleeding it through. There's now only a few things left to do, but thankfully my voice is working enough to say what's become the motto of this build. So without further ado, let's crack on.
Looks good that rad, doesn't it? Very nice. Plenty of room for a fat old turbo in there and all.
Now the new rad's in, I can reinstall my refurbished front grills, complete with brand new fog lights which have finally arrived. I start by cleaning up the front bumper, ready for the grills to be fitted, and meanwhile Dad finishes a job that he started before I arrived.
Exhaust on.
All I've done is packed that joint in now, put a bit of solid rubber in there.
Just to push it down a bit.
It just can't close up.
That's the whole exhaust on, isn't it?
That's it.
Because it rubbed that little bit of the bumper away, didn't it? Won't touch that.
It's no lower than it was originally either.
No lower than it was. It's all the way through front to back. That looks awesome, doesn't it?
You know what Brian said?
What's he say?
What you want to do,
Yeah.
cut a hole here and put one this side. He said that would look absolutely wicked.
Do you know what?
But no.
With my not yet dual exit exhaust now fitted, we can reassemble the grills. We screw in all the fittings for the new fog lights and make sure they're secure and they've got bulbs in them. And it's at this point the build gets really exciting. The mechanical stuff is basically done and the car works, so now it's the little jobs that finish the car off and get it ready for the road. The grills and their new fog lights are screwed back in, and then there's only a few small bits left to do. The Super Seicento rebuild has been a long process and it hasn't always been easy, but through it all my dad and the other guys in the workshop have stuck with my dogged determination to save this little yellow nugget. Yeah!
Yeah.
Awesome. That's so good. There were times when it looked like the car might never be finished, but we've always found a solution, we've always got things sorted, and now there's only a few trivial things away from my car being done.
I don't know what to do at this back edge, whether to...
With each and every detail done exactly as I wanted it, this truly is the car of my dreams, and it's finally becoming reality. Fueled partly by tea and partly by the thought of how awesome this thing is going to be when it's finished, the last few jobs are done. After all this time and all this work, the car has more than earned its stripe back. Now I can finally say that the Super Seicento is back.